Hello sports fans, welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my 2025-2026 NFL awards. This video is going to consist of awards that I come up with, as well as awards that actually exist. But we'll start off with some of the awards that I made up, and the first one is Best Team, and this is going to be of the regular season. But I think there's really three teams you could argue here. You could argue the Seahawks, Broncos, or Patriots. All three went 14-3, tied for the best record in the NFL. But I'm going to give the award to the Seahawks. They played in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL in the NFC West, and they're also the most consistently dominant team in the NFL, and they finished with a plus 191 point differential, which led the NFL. So the Seahawks, they're my best team from the regular season. Then moving on to the opposite of the best team, we've got the worst team. So there's a lot of bad teams, and you could really argue a number of different teams, like the Cardinals, Raiders, Jets, Titans, Giants, somebody else. But I'm going to give it to the Raiders. They were just terrible. I saw them play in Week 17 when they played my Giants, and the Giants won by a lot, which that says a lot considering how bad the Giants were. So the Raiders, they're a complete disaster in year one and their only year under Pete Carroll, and they're easily my worst team in the NFL. Moving on to the most surprising team. This one's an interesting one, and I think there's three teams who are really surprising this season. The first is the Jaguars, who went 13-4, then you've got the Patriots, who went 14-3, or the Bears, who went 11-6. But I really don't think you can go wrong with any of the three, but I think the most surprising team was the Jaguars. They went 14-3 last year, they flipped that record around going 13-4, and I think they were the most truly surprising team in the NFL. Because when you look at the Bears and the Patriots, they're both expected to be not necessarily as good as they were, but still pretty solid teams. Like, I saw a couple people pick the Patriots to make the playoffs, and I definitely thought the Bears would be a very solid team, and they ended up being just better than solid. But when looking at the Jaguars, I don't really remember anyone saying they'd be a good team. Most people picked them to finish well under 500, and instead they go out and go 13-4. So I think the Jaguars were easily the most surprising team in the NFL. Moving on to the most disappointing team. So this one, I think you could argue three different directions. I think this one can go to the Ravens, the Chiefs, or the Lions. Now, all three, they were supposed to be Super Bowl contenders to start the year, and instead all three missed the playoffs. Now, I really think this comes down to either the Chiefs or the Lions, because I'm willing to give the Ravens a little bit of a pass, because Lamar Jackson obviously missed some time. Now, the Chiefs also had an injury to the quarterback spot, and Mahomes tore his ACL, but they were still not very good, even when they had Mahomes. But I think it really comes down to the Chiefs or the Lions, and I'm going to give it to the Lions, because they were supposed to be Super Bowl contenders, obviously the Chiefs were as well, but the Chiefs, they're also expected to take a little bit of a step back from where they were last year, because with how they won all those one-score games, that was just never sustainable, and they're always going to take a step back. Now, I don't know anyone who expected them to go 6-11, but they were never expected to be quite as good as they were last year. But the Lions, they're expected to be great, they're expected to be in the Super Bowl. I picked them to make the Super Bowl at the start of the season. It was actually Lions-Ravens, my preseason Super Bowl pick. And the Lions, they were still a good team, they just went 9-8. And they just did not win enough games that they probably would have won in the past couple seasons. So I've got the Lions as my most disappointing team. Moving on to the breakout player of the year, and this one's pretty easy, it's Drake May. Now, there's definitely some other contenders here, like Javonte Williams, Michael Wilson, or Parker Washington, but Drake May was easily the biggest breakout in the NFL this season. He ended up leading the NFL in completion percentage, he finished top 5 in yards and touchdowns, and he also led the Patriots to the number 2 seed in the AFC, and now a Super Bowl appearance. But Drake May, easily the breakout player of the year. Moving on to the most disappointing player. So I think there's 4 players you can really argue for this award. Those being Saquon Barkley, Brian Thomas Jr., Justin Jefferson, and Brock Bowers. But I think the most disappointing of those 4 is Brian Thomas Jr. He had a great rookie year with almost 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns, and he was expected to have another great year, but he was just not as good. As this year he had just 48 catches for 707 yards and 2 scores. And he was also passed up on the depth chart by guys like Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers. And I think something that makes this season even more disappointing for Brian Thomas Jr. is the Jaguars were good. It's not like he was on a terrible offense like Justin Jefferson or Brock Bowers, but the Jaguars' offense was actually pretty good, and Trevor Lawrence had the best year of his career, and Brian Thomas Jr. still wasn't great. So he is easily my most disappointing player. And moving on to the NFL awards that actually exist, and when I say my winners for these awards, it's who I think should win the award, not who I think will win the award. But we'll start off with the Assistant Coach of the Year. So the NFL has named 5 finalists for this award, and those are Eagles defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores, Seahawks offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels, and Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. And all 5 of these guys did a great job this year, but my pick to win Assistant Coach of the Year is Clint Kubiak. He did a really impressive job with the Seahawks. He helped them be a top 3 scoring offense in the NFL. They had a great pass game. Sam Darnold had another great year. JSN led the NFL in receiving yards. And while they were great throwing the ball, they're also one of the most effective run games in the NFL. So I think Clint Kubiak did a great job, and there's definitely a reason he's going to be head coach of the Raiders after the Super Bowl. And he's my Assistant Coach of the Year. Moving on to Coach of the Year, and this is another really tough one, because you've got so many coaches who did a really good job this season. You got Mike Vrabel, Liam Cohen, Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald, Kyle Shanahan, or somebody else I didn't name. But I could really make a legitimate argument for all 5 of these guys, but my coach of the year is Liam Cohen. In his first year with the Jaguars, they went 13-4. They were my most surprising team for a reason, and he really helped fix the Jaguars' offense, which had been pretty bad, and he also had helped Trevor Lawrence have the best year of his career. So I can definitely understand somebody else, but I've got Liam Cohen as coach of the year. Moving on to comeback player of the year, and this one's pretty easy, it's Christian McCaffrey. He had a great year. He ran for 1,200 yards and 10 scores, and he also had 924 yards and 7 scores as a receiver. And that's a year after he just played 4 games because of Achilles tendonitis. And something really impressive for McCaffrey this year is he was able to stay healthy while pretty much every other 49er player suffered some kind of injury. But a great year for McCaffrey, and he's pretty easily my comeback player of the year. Moving on to protector of the year for the best offensive line. So this is an interesting one, and it's the first year we've had this award. But the NFL has named 6 finalists for the award. You got Broncos left tackle Garrett Bowles, Dolphins center Aaron Brewer, Chiefs center Creed Humphrey, Broncos guard Quinn Meinerz, hopefully I said that correctly, Lions tackle Penei Sewell, and Bears guard Joe Thuney. And I really have no idea how to pick a winner for this award, but I'll just give it to Garrett Bowles. He was one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. He was the left tackle for arguably the best offensive line, so I'll just give it to him as the protector of the year. Moving on to the offensive rookie of the year, and this is another tough one, but I think there's about 3 guys you could really make an argument for. And those players, Jackson Dart, Tetairoa McMillan, or Tyler Shough. Now, if you compare the numbers for each guy, all 3 had very good rookie seasons. As Jackson Dart threw for 2,272 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, and he also ran for 487 yards and 9 scores. Then for Tyler Shough, he threw for 2,384 yards, 10 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and he ran for another 3 touchdowns. And then for T-Mac, he caught 70 passes for just over 1,000 yards with 1,014, and he found the end zone 7 times. Now, I think this is really a 2-man race between Jackson Dart and Tetairoa McMillan, but I'm going to give the offensive rookie of the year to Jackson Dart. Now, I might be slightly biased as a Giants fan, but I think he showed more elite flashes, and I also think he was a little bit more consistent throughout his rookie season. So Jackson Dart is my offensive rookie of the year. Moving on to defensive rookie of the year, and this is another tough one, and the 5 finalists for the award, Nick Emmanwori, Abdul Carter, James Pierce Jr., Carson Schlesinger, and Xavier Watts. But I really think this comes down to either Carson Schlesinger or Nick Emmanwori. They both had really good rookie years. As Schlesinger, he had 156 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 3 passes defended. And then for Nick Emmanwori, he had 81 tackles, 9 for a loss, 2.5 sacks, 1 interception, and 11 passes defended. Now, this is a tough one, but I'm going to give it to Nick Emmanwori. I just think he was a little bit better of an overall player, and I also think he played a more important role for the Seahawks defense, which ended up being one of the best in the NFL. So Nick Emmanwori, my defensive rookie of the year. Moving on to the offensive player of the year, and this is a really tough one, and it might be the hardest award for me to give out in the entire video. But there's really 4 guys I can understand the argument for. Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Puka Nacua, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. But I can really understand an argument for all 4 guys. For McCaffrey, he was insane. He had over 1,000 rushing yards, nearly 1,000 receiving yards, and he's pretty much the entire offense for the 49ers. Then for Bijan, he actually led the NFL in scrimmage yards with 2,298. And then for Puka and JSN, it's a pretty similar argument for both guys, as both had about 1,700 receiving yards and 10 scores. But for JSN, he had actually more yards and more yards per catch. But Puka, he had more catches, and when looking at it by yards per game basis, he actually had a little bit more, as he had 107 yards per game. JSN had 105. Now, I think this probably comes down to either Puka Nacua or Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I'm going to give it to JSN. I just think the more yards and more yards per catch is the slight advantage, but you could really argue that either way. But I got JSN as the offensive player of the year. Moving on to the defensive player of the year, and this one's pretty easy, it's Myles Garrett. I mean, he broke the NFL sack record of 23, and he was easily the best defensive player in the NFL. Not a whole ton to say there. And finally, we've got the NFL MVP. And this is a 2-man race between Matthew Stafford and Drake May. And both obviously had great seasons. For Stafford, he actually led the NFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns, as he threw for 4,707 yards and 46 scores, and he also threw 8 interceptions. Then for Drake May, he led the NFL with a 72% completion percentage. He was 4th in the NFL with 4,394 yards, and he was 3rd in the NFL with 31 touchdown passes. Although when looking at total touchdowns, it is a little bit closer because May did run for 4 scores. Now, I've seen the argument to have Drake May as the more valuable player because he had less help around him, but he's also played an easier schedule. And while Stafford has more help, he's also played a significantly harder schedule. So I don't really think the argument does a whole ton. But for me, the MVP of the 2025-2026 NFL season is Matthew Stafford. I think the difference of 15 passing touchdowns or 11 total touchdowns is just too much for Drake May to overcome, and it's not like Drake May even had more passing yards. But Matthew Stafford, he was the best player in the NFL this year, and he's my NFL MVP. But those are my 2025-2026 NFL awards. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications. I do my best to put this as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.